Hello, BookTube. I know we're 10 days into August, but I've been watching BookTube. That will come as a shock, but I watch a lot of BookTube. And there are all sorts of people doing July wrap-ups. And it makes me feel left out. I almost never do that on this channel, and I'm thinking maybe that I should change that. Maybe I should institute a new thing. I do the upcoming month's TBR-BY, To Be Read by You. Maybe I should do a wrap-up as well, where I talk about 10 books that from the previous month that I want to recommend to you that maybe I haven't mentioned on this channel. I could easily do that. I only mention on this channel a fraction of what I read. So I'm going to give that a try. I took some notes on books from July of 2018. So this will be a 2018 check-in. And July was a good month for me. I read well over 100 books, and some of them I loved quite a bit. Some of them I loved quite a bit. Some July publications I loved quite a bit. Some of them you'll be able to tell because I was all over social media, and I wrote reviews, and I enthused, and I interviewed their authors. Like, for instance, Eager by Ben Goldfarb, his book on beavers, which I'll be recommending it forever, I'm sure, as long as it's in print. It'll come out in paperback next year or the year after that. I'll recommend it again. It's just one of those books that, you know, one of those nonfiction books that you can just hand to anybody. You can recommend to anybody. I read a bunch of books like that in July. July was also a month for really horrible books, too. Really, really horrible books. Books by naysayers or by hatchet men or by apparatchiks of the current American government. Books that... It was a book by Sebastian Gorka. Those of you who don't know who he is, or consider yourselves fortunate. He's a totally reprehensible slug on the fine china. There were at least 2 books, I think, on the current American Vice President, Mike Pence, who doesn't deserve an index card, much less 1 book, much less 2. But there were also lots of books that I really liked. And I made notes of 10 of those that I want to recommend to you. And I wish I wish I could easily put their pictures here, but I'll note them all down below. And the first one is Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers, which will be familiar to a lot of you because she's a BookTube darling. She's liked on BookTube. This is the book 3 in her Wayfarer series about the Exodus fleet, about a fleet of a group of humans faring out into the darkness of space without any real end destination in mind, and becoming a bit of a curiosity along the way. And I don't know. The first book, I thought, you can't. Doesn't have the makings to stretch out very long. But this was a charming book, very low key, very small scale science fiction, but still, I really liked it. It sort of cemented in my mind the fact that this is just an author that I am going to like. I've seen her now, 3 different outings. I don't think she could write a book that I really dislike. So it would be just, it's not challenging science fiction at all, but it's very enjoyable. Then the next one is another one I've seen occasionally on BookTube. It's the Lido by Libby Page. It's a novel about a public swimming pool in Brixton that is being threatened. It's been around for generations, and now it's being threatened with demolition, with being removed in order to make a condo or a car park or some such blight of modern life. And one of the focuses, there are 2 focuses, narrative focuses in the book. One is an older woman whose life has been bounded by that pool. She swims in it, yes, but she's also many of the landmarks of her life are directly or relatively closely connected to the Lido. So it's horrifying to her to think that this thing might just disappear. And the other narrative focus is a younger woman, a reporter, who is given the story of telling the story of the Lido. And she comes to know the first woman, and they form a bond, and there's an enormous amount of storytelling inside the story of this book. And I read the advanced copy and thought, well, that was charming. And then I read the finished copy and thought, okay, that was maybe more than charming. That was actually a deft book, a very deft book on passages of time and how weird it is to have memories of things that don't exist anymore. So I really do recommend it. I would have recommended it maybe as a carefree read, the first time around. Now I recommend it as a little more. I think it's a more satisfying book than I first thought. That noise you hear is Frida chewing on cardboard. I was wondering how long it would take her to figure out that she could destroy my mail packages instead of just letting them sit on the floor. I once had a beagle who was perfect for that. I used to get almost as many advance copies in the mail back then as I do now. And there was no booktube. I don't know how I got along, but I would open the package and just toss it in the air, and he would snatch it before it hit the floor and just rip it to shreds. But anyway, number 3 is, I think, something we've seen on this channel before. It's Marc Ambinder's book, The Brink, about the Reagan presidency, about an incident in 1983 when a war game named Able Archer very nearly got misunderstood into World War III. And there were 2 books on that mishap that came out in 2018 so far. I don't think any others are scheduled to come out. And Ambinder's was really, really good. It's not a long book, and it's thrilling from start to finish. So when I was reading it, I was really enjoying it. Any granular study of the Reagan administration, I really enjoy. But I was also thinking the whole time, boy, well, you know, as a self-appointed ambassador for nonfiction, this is the kind of nonfiction book you would give to almost anybody, and they would read it and like it. So that's no small thing. Then number 4 is The Promise of the Grand Canyon by John Ross, which is pretty sure something I've mentioned on this channel before. It's a book about the John Wesley Powell expedition that encountered the Grand Canyon and first grappled with it and shot it. And there have been many books on John Wesley Powell, and John Wesley Powell also wrote his own book, and yet this is a terrific, terrific book. The author has to come up with something new to say about the Powell expedition, and he does. He comes up with a bunch of new things to say, and he also reads the primary sources really well, which is no trivial thing. A lot of historians think, you know, I'll just go along to get along. I like somebody like Stacy Schiff that will just look at the primary sources and rip them to shreds, figuring out what they really mean. And this author does that. So Americana, American history, really gripping narrative history, adventure history, all of that stuff. If that checks your boxes, you're going to love this book. And then number 5 is a controversial book from the month of July, The Case Against Impeaching Trump by Alan Dershowitz. I myself am a fan of Alan Dershowitz's writing. I don't think I've ever read a book by him that didn't really entertain me. This one, of course, is incredibly controversial. He's made a point when defending it on talk shows. I don't know how he finds the patience to go on talk shows. I really don't, because he has to explain on every single one. It's like people don't even listen to him. He has to explain on every single one of them that he is not a friend of President Trump, that he has no relationship with President Trump, that he's never offered President Trump any legal advice. He's only met the man 3 times, all 3 times to talk about the Middle East. He is not a wingnut. He is not a white nationalist. He is not any of the monstrous, loathsome creatures that currently run this country. He was, in this book and in his appearances on cable news, he is only making a constitutional case. And the constitutional case he's making in this book, which is very gripping no matter where you stand on the politics of the subject, the constitutional case he makes in this book is that it's a bad idea to impeach people because you don't like them. It boils down to that. It boils down to a lot of legal stuff too, but it mainly boils down to that outrage should not be the basis for impeachment, and that if you make it easy or you set a precedent for it to happen that way, you'll regret it. I was furious with the book the whole time while I was reading it, but I was also thinking, I was grappling with this is not a writer who brings up trivial points. I do recommend it very much so as a July release, no matter what you think ultimately about the end product. I myself read things like this to be challenged. I would hope you do too. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually very healthy. So it's on this list. Then number 6 is it's a gay novel, and it's a gay novel that I think might be self-published. I came across it just by random chance, but I don't think I've ever seen it at a bookstore. I don't think I've ever got an advance copy or ever would. I don't think I've ever heard about it, but I really liked it. I do recommend it. It's called Before and After Michael, and it's by Jemiah Jefferson. And it's about a couple who've been together, a gay couple who've been together for a good long length of time. They know each other, they trust each other, they love each other, hot for each other. And they meet someone. They meet a younger man. And they both feel things for him. And he feels things for both of them. And the book just navigates from there, sometimes with some really spot-on wry humor, about what might happen. what might happen. If, for instance, Michael is not fated to break them up, then what might they be fated to become? In other words, the book very, very playfully, very insightfully says, well, the two standard traditional options here, the couple breaks up and one of them stays with Michael, or the couple stays together and they both reject Michael. What if both of those are a little bit weird? So I liked it very much. I thought it was a very interesting experience reading. So I do recommend it. I'll note all these things down below here. Then number 7 is a paperback release. It came out in July. It's by Roy Scranton, and it's called We're Doomed, Now What? Just a paperback collection of his environmental and political essays that it's not anything we haven't seen, right? Even on this channel, we've seen books along those same lines. It's just, in this case, what sells it is what sells these things in most cases. It's just the voice of the writer. He's just a terrific writer. Just a lot of fun and a lot of bare-knuckled interest while you're reading it. So as a book in July that I don't think I've ever mentioned, I strongly recommend it. Then number 8 is a kid's book. It's by Ruth, Quayle, and Alison Friend, and it's called That Bear Can't Babysit. and it's about just what you think. It's about a bear who is drafted into babysitting a bunch of little ones, and they walk all over him. They try all sorts of things. He seems like a pushover, and as the case with all really great children's picture books. There's a wisdom underlying even his persecution and his fish out of waterness, and there's an ending that will just put a smile on your face. Just a wonderful book. Then number 9 is a romance novel. You've seen it in your bookstores or your supermarket checkout counters. It's Eloisa James. It's Born to be Wild. She has a series about the Wilde brothers, the wild men of Linwood Castle, and she must have known when she wrote the first one that she had struck a note with her readers, because I think this is going to be a long series, and as far as I'm concerned, the longer the better, because they're just so terrific. The various wild men are all hunky, dreamy, adorable in their own different ways, and they are the indisputable stars of the show, as you can tell by the fact that they don't even bother to share the covers of the books with any women. This is steamy modern Regency romance at its absolute most playful and finest. So if that's your cup of tea. And then number 10 is Bound for Gold by William Martin, the author of Back Bay and Cape Cod and Annapolis and Citizen Washington, a bunch of first-rate books that everybody has read and loved. And this is, he has two main characters, Evangeline Carrington and Peter Fallon, who are rare book experts. Peter Fallon is a rare book dealer, a rare book expert, who manages to get into, through the idea of authenticating manuscripts or defrauding manuscripts, manages to get into a whole bunch of vaguely Dan Brown, Da Vinci-esque escapades. And this is his latest one, about a manuscript about the California Gold Rush. But those of you who know William Martin know that he does this perfectly. He was doing this when Dan Brown wasn't even thinking about writing things. He does this perfectly, this business of shifting the narrative from telling the history in just rousing historical fiction to the present day with people figuring things out about the history through its documentation. He does that just perfectly. I mean, he's an old hand at it by now. And Bound for Gold is all about the California Gold Rush. I, myself, reading it, was the first time. I read it twice now. The first time I was hoping, I mean, if you're from Boston, if you know Boston really, really well, and believe me, he does, then you hear California Gold Rush, you immediately think the Clipper ships. And I was kind of hoping for a Clipper ship novel. It is not a Clipper ship novel, but it is so good. I quickly forgot about my original design for writing over the author's shoulder. So I highly recommend it. It will be in bookstores, probably for the rest of the summer. And it's and in libraries, of course. Well, if those of you who read William Martin won't need a recommendation of his book, but those of you who maybe never have, you don't have to worry. about this being a so-and-so novel, a Peter Fallon, a fill-in-the-blank novel. You're not going to feel left out at all. And that's it. That is a 10-book check-in for the month of July. And the only thing I want to finish with is a goat. I want to finish with one of, or perhaps the most appalling book of the entire month of July. And that is The Briefing by Sean Spicer, the former press secretary for the Trump administration, who started the Trump administration's relationship with the press and thereby the world, and started his own tenor at the podium that has been graced by some of the most intelligent men and women in the history of American politics, with a bald-faced and easily disprovable lie. He took the podium and immediately loudly said that Trump's inauguration was attended by more people than any public event in American history. And he did that knowing perfectly well that the Parks Department keeps track of these things, that there are photos of every minute of the event from a huge distance away, and that there were photos of every minute of the same event from the same vantage point at the same times for the previous 6 administrations, and that you can compare those photos, you can compare the film footage. He knew perfectly well, in other words, that what he was saying from that podium, the very first thing he said, was a complete black and white lie, an easily disprovable lie. And it wasn't the first one. He kept doing it. And all of his successors have done the same. They tell easily disprovable lies. They will get up at that podium, and I know someone who was a reporter for that first press briefing, that first Sean Spicer press briefing, and she said that all the reporters in the room were just saying, "Geez, is he going to feel embarrassed tomorrow when the White House makes him pull that back? Boy, oh boy, did he not know that you can easily check this thing and that it's obviously not true?" And they were amazed that that never happened. They were amazed that this was just going to be the way this White House approached the truth, by just making it up, making stuff up, and bald-facedly denying what we could all see with our eyes and ears. And I don't know, I guess a part of me, the romantic part of me, was hoping. Washington, D.C. it's a city mired in corruption and mired in head cases and nut jobs and trimmers and whatnot. But it's also, I used to live there. I have many fond memories. It's also a city of reinvention, legitimate reinvention. And I guess I was kind of hoping that this book might be that this book might be, I mean, Sean Spicer was fairly well respected in the DC establishment before that moment and before his stint as a press secretary, a lying press secretary. And I was kind of hoping, you're out now, you're never coming back. Surely you have nothing to lose by writing a terrific book. And instead, the book is just a continuation of his stint as press secretary, in tone, in tenor, in posture, in its adherence to the truth, nominal at best, non-existent at worst. It's just a continuation of that. So not only is it a really bad book, but it also deeply disappointed me, because I was hoping that maybe it would be different, and it wasn't. So if we're going to do in these monthly check-ins, if we're going to nominate a loser for the month, that would be the loser for July. And that's it. So that is just a sketch of maybe something that I want to keep doing, where when the month is over, I let a little time settle, I look back at my notes and my inventory and whatnot, and maybe talk about some of the books I missed, talking about through the whole of the month itself. Let me know if you like the idea, or if this is finally the straw that has broken the camel's back as far as overloading you all with book recommendations. It's bad enough that I recommend all month long, and then I recommend more books looking forward to the next month. Now I'm talking about maybe recommending more books from the month before. It might be that I'm recommending too many books. Just let me know. But one way or another, I'm going to wrap this up now and go play with my puppy. But I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.